I was actually washing my hands in the men's room a moment ago, thinking about why Bitcoin matters in it. It reminded me of one of the pivotal experiences of my life was in 2020 when COVID happened and then the vax happened, and I was totally vax agnostic at the time. I just didn't have strong feelings about it one way or the other. I wasn't against vaccines. And one night I said, during the course of my job, maybe, we should test a product before we give it to everybody at gunpoint. And the reaction was, shut up, fascist! That's racist. What? And the reaction was just so overwhelming, but not just overwhelming, but uniform. Like everybody I'd ever met in television, which was the world that I lived in my whole life, was mad at me about that, from the on-air people to the executives. And I remember thinking, something's going on here. Like, what is this? Why does everybody in my business have the same view on a topic that should be open for debate? Well, to make an extremely long story short, and a pivotal one in my life, I realized that our single biggest advertiser where I work, but also at every other channel, was pharma. And I'd always thought that advertisers paid to sell products on the air, but it turns out that pharma does not do that. They're not putting ads for some obscure rheumatoid arthritis drug on television so you will ask your doctor to be prescribed that drug. You're never going to remember the name of it. The reason they're doing this is to buy protection. It's a protection racket, like the mafia used to run in New York City. It's a great window to be ashamed if it got broken. Okay, here's $30. And that's what they did. And I realized that there's kind of no fighting that under our current system, which is a very long way of saying the people who control the money control the people. And that's just a fact. That's a fact of human existence that took me till I was in my early 50s to understand. I just didn't quite get it. I don't know why. I thought, art would triumph or truth would triumph, or in the end, beauty wins because it's, more virtuous than ugliness or something like that. Some totally deluded view of a meritocracy that no longer exists. But the truth is, actually, money wins. And so if you want to be free, you have to have some control over your money. And we don't. And we don't because, really, by constitutional fiat, the U.S. government controls the money that we use. Now, in an ideal circumstance, that would be totally fine because you'd have responsible people in control of the money. But we don't. We have day traders in charge of our money, which is to say, you work your whole life and it can be taken away from you instantly or wasted incrementally over generations, and there's literally nothing you can do about it. And so I guess that's another way of saying the current system is the worst possible system for honest people and people who just want to work and derive the fruits of that labor. They're screwed. And so we need another system. And I think crypto is by far the most promising answer to that. The question is, how do you get people to adopt it? And this would be maybe the one unpopular thing I would say to a group of crypto enthusiasts. And by the way, this is not my first crypto conference, so I know the enthusiasm is real and very intense, almost blindingly intense. Actually, the last time I was at a crypto conference, I went blind for 3 days from the intensity. No, I'm serious. I had to wear medically prescribed sunglasses because I couldn't see, because I'd stared into the eyes of crypto people. And I love that. It's like crypto people aren't just in it to make a buck, they're in it to change the world forever. And that's the coolest. I just love that. I'm not making fun of that at all. I love the high-mindedness of the whole thing. I love the idealism of it. I love the horsepower, intellectual horsepower behind it. These are not shallow people. These are people who can answer every single question except who was Satoshi, which they don't answer. Someone should answer that. Nope. I think we know. Anyway, in fact, I have a friend who's probably sitting here who told me he did know, but I don't believe him. And I don't care if it was the CIA. It doesn't matter. The idea is still a great idea. Obviously, it was the CIA. I think we all know that. It's like Signal. They got there first. It's a honey trap. But it doesn't make it any less important, and it doesn't make it any less a history-transforming technology. But I feel like right now, for reasons that Don, I thought, explained very, very well, we're at a pivot point. So you would have thought 4 years ago when Biden got air quotes elected with over 1 billion votes, I think, in that range, most popular president like ever, way more popular than Black Jesus ever thought of being. when he got elected, I assumed, just because I thought I understood how politics worked, that this would be great news for the crypto world because a lot of the big investors were big Democratic donors. And if there's one group the Democratic Party pays attention to, it's its donors. When they want to depose a president for senility, done. So I thought that they would prevail upon the Biden administration to give crypto a break and maybe even carve out some legal guidance so people could go ahead and pursue what clearly is going to happen anyway. There's going to be cryptocurrency going forward, period. And the United States should be at the forefront of that because we're the technology leader of the world, right? That's what I thought. And then I watched these weird moves from Gensler over the last 4 years. Probably, I think it was around 2 years ago, he made it really clear, like, I'm an enemy of this and I'm going to stop you. And of course, Gensler's not an independent regulator. We don't have independent regulators. He's a tool of the machine, just like the rest of them. And he's doing this because his masters want him to do it. Sorry to blow your mind. But it's not like Gary Gensler one morning in the shower thought, I don't like crypto, I'm going to try and shut it down. There's a consensus that it's a threat. And that's the point, and I can't improve upon what Don said, but just to bottom line it once again, because this is the point that matters, it was a choice for the Democratic Party between its donors, whose bidding they always do. If the donors want it, they do it, or continuing to control 350 million Americans, and they went with control. That's how threatening the technology is to the people in charge. They understood we're going to have to give the finger to some big crypto investors because our whole scam depends on it. That is literally the conclusion they came to. And so it seems to me you got to figure out how to respond to that, or they will crush it. They are absolutely intent on crushing it in this country. So how do you do that? And I think there's only one way to do it, and that's by getting the population, non-crypto investors, people who aren't, in crypto, to adopt it as a medium of exchange. And I know this has always been the plan. The whole point of Bitcoin, at least as it was explained to me by Michael Saylor when I first got really interested in this. By the way, if you haven't talked to Saylor about Bitcoin, you definitely should. That's going to be the wildest night of your life. You will not take a bite of food as you stare slack-jawed at him going through all human history from the caves until present. It's an amazing experience. But the point is, when it was first explained to me, crypto was many things. It was a store of value. It was an investment vehicle. Obviously, that has, those have been successful. But it was also a medium of exchange. It was going to be a way for people to buy goods and services, to transact directly with each other without intermediaries. There is no reason that every one of my financial transactions should have 1 million pilot fish clinging to it, parasites living off of my labor. It's disgusting, actually. No one ever says it. And by the way, the government has no problem with it. In other words, they're not, what's the highest credit card interest rate in this country? We're living in a moment of maximum credit card debt. It's like over 20%. Is it 30-something? Well, that should just be absolutely, that's disgusting, actually. It's disgusting. And a normal country would be like, no, you can't charge 34% interest. What? And very few countries have ever allowed that. In fact, the mafia never tried that. And when they did, loan sharking, they went to prison. But no one's cracking down on the credit card companies. They're great. We love the credit card companies. So why are the credit card companies so beloved, but crypto is so despised? Well, the answer is really simple, because crypto gives the average person the freedom to conduct his affairs without oversight or control. That's it. It cuts out the middlemen, including the federal government. So in other words, if you want to know whether something's good or bad, this is like a way I assess a lot of things, having spent my life in DC, look at who's against it. I'm not really sure what I think of crypto. Oh, Gary Gensler's against it? Elizabeth Warren's against it? Joe Biden's against it? Sign me freaking up. So look, here's the good news, and this is the really important thing, is that you should do a bunch of things. If I'm a big crypto investor, which I'm not because I'm not rich enough, but let's say I was, the first thing I would do is just drop a ton of money. I'd just drop a money bomb on DC. I'd do to DC with cash what the US Air Force did to the Ho Chi Minh Trail in 1968. I would just napalm it with USD, okay? I would just buy everybody. And our politicians are not super expensive, not geniuses, but the upside is they don't cost much. You can buy one for a weekend at Baker's Bay. You can, trust me, you should consider that. Bring them down to Puerto Rico. Set them up with some ladies. You'll have them for life, okay? Let's go, that's right. So you should definitely do that, okay? But that's not enough. You really need the average person to understand the value of crypto, of Bitcoin. I would say Bitcoin specifically. I'm not sort of excluding the possibility of others, but I'm most familiar with Bitcoin, so I'll just say Bitcoin. And the average person understands, this is my view as an average person, I understand the utility of like buying low and selling high. I understand the utility of the long hold. That all makes sense to me. What is harder for me to understand is how I buy a tin of Zyn, the life-saving nicotine replacement device that some of us are lucky enough to use. And the truth is, you cannot, in case you don't know what I'm talking about this. It's Zyn. Until I can buy a tin of Zyn in Bitcoin, Bitcoin to me is a theoretical concept. It's a great idea, but it hasn't been made entirely real to me. And the truth is, if you want people on your side, you have to make things real. This was the problem with the US dollar when it was first introduced. When banknotes were replaced by currency, when gold coins were replaced by currency, people are like, well, what is this? It's a piece of paper. It has no value. I don't trust it. Do we really trust the US government? People didn't trust it 100 years ago. And the only way they began to trust the US dollar is when they got something for it, when they went into the store and bought a bushel of corn with it. And they're like, oh, it's not a piece of paper, it's actually a bushel of corn. It translates into something tangible that I need immediately. This is super obvious, but for some reason, this is the one factor that a lot of crypto enthusiasts have left out. And by the way, I know very well that it's complicated to do this. It is. And Bitcoin, I think, is inherently complicated to do this with. You know more than I, but that's my understanding of it. It's not insurmountable. It's not insurmountable. And if you think it is, look at the weed industry. No, I'm serious. Which is still not legal federally, so far as I know. Some of you are probably in the weed industry. Anyone here a marijuana grower? You don't have to. Yeah, in the back, of course. So the weed industry is not actually legal federally. It exists in a kind of tolerated gray area, and every society has these. But that has not prevented, I live in a very rural area, it's not prevented massive capital investment in weed dispensaries where I live and probably the state where you live. And a lot of that is a cash economy. They don't have the benefit of a writ of permission from Gary Gensler or any other regulator, but they just went ahead and did it anyway. And you can stop one person, you can stop one entity, you could probably, attack Coinbase till they had to change their way of doing business, but you can't attack 100 million people who want something, is the truth. So if I were heavily invested in Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency right now, my first order of business would be to figure out a way and to fund away mechanisms for people to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And when that happens, you will not be able to take it away from them. And the truth is, that's how people are convinced. The other side is doing that. They're trying to stick us with central bank digital currencies. How do we know that? Not because they're admitting it. No one ever admits anything. Because they're taking away cash. I used to get these texts from people, they're taking away cash. And I was like, a lot of people in the mentally ill community have my text. And I was like, maybe this is just some figment of their imagination. We'll try to get cash. There are no ATMs. Or they're broken. And people don't accept cash. Point of sale vendors do not accept cash. Go to an airport, go to a concert, no cash. Increasingly, that's true. That's an accident? I don't think so. It's a plan, obviously, to train people to pay for things using a very specific means of payment, a credit card, a debit card. And over time, that's going to work. And it's going to work in the only way that does work. You convince people to want something or to accept something. And after a while, it becomes impossible to fight against that. So if you believe in cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin specifically, as the future of human flourishing and freedom, as the only way that people can preserve their autonomy in a world that's literally forcing dangerous chemicals into your arm, in a country that's becoming obviously totalitarian by the day. Don and I had a dinner earlier. We were talking about friends of ours who were in jail. They tried to put Don in jail, actually in jail, not pretend cable news jail, but the kind of jail with handcuffs. He didn't do anything wrong. So that's the country that we're living in. It's hard for us to accept that because it's so shocking. It's such a dramatic departure from the country we grew up in, but it's absolutely real. In order to survive it, we're going to need a way to pay for goods and services that cannot be controlled by people who want to control us. It's literally that simple. And I know that doesn't have anything to do with the Bitcoin investment strategy, which is a separate track, but I would say longitudinally, it's much more important. And I'll just be totally blunt with you, and I'm sure someone's filming this, but I don't really care. Until I can, stage a getaway with Bitcoin, I'm serious, until I can move from country to country with Bitcoin and not be tracked as I do it, as is my inalienable human right. I have the right of free movement as a human being. I have the right of free will as a human being. That was not granted to me by the government. I was born with that. It was bestowed by God, period. Until I can exercise that with this currency, it's less meaningful to me. The second I can, it will be something I'd lay my life down for. actually, because it's the key to my freedom. So last thing I'll say is, as you're making pitches, I know everybody here, you're probably all going to grab me after, give me a super intense lecture about how I'm wrong. But I would say reserve a little bit of your conversations with civilians about this technology, cryptocurrency technology. Reserve a little bit of that for explaining how they can regain autonomy and freedom by using it in their day-to-day lives. That's really, really meaningful. It's not theoretical. Most people are not theoretical. They're not at 30,000 feet. They're at 6 feet. And they want to know, if it really goes down, how is crypto going to help me? What do I do with my Bitcoin? You know what I mean? Like, how do I charter the plane with Bitcoin? Like, honestly, like, where do I find that? And how do I keep the US government from shutting down the exchange or taking it off my phone, hacking into my phone, stealing the keys? Like, how do I do that? If you could solve those problems or explain them to someone not super bright like me, I mean, I would liquidate and put every bit in Bitcoin. I mean it, because that's how strongly I feel about it. So I really, really hope you do that, or at least explain it to me. If you have an answer for that, come to me after, and I will just become your greatest evangelist ever. But until then, I'm just rooting for you so fervently. I think you hold the key to keeping alive the country that I grew up in. So thank you very much for having me.
Alrighty, so now we're gonna open this up to the panel. I'm gonna bring Don Jr., Tucker Carlson, and David Bailey to the stage. And remember those questions that I told you to mentally keep note of, track down, maybe put in your notes? Let's get those out, because you're gonna have time to ask these lovely people some questions. Thank you.
What's going on, everyone? Are you having a good time today? Are y'all hyped for tomorrow? Well, I wanted to just say thank you for coming to Nashville. I know it's a bit of a change from Miami, but I feel an energy in the air at this event. I feel a cultural moment happening right now, a zeitgeist forming over the city of Nashville, and I think we're up for a pretty special day tomorrow. So I just want to say thank you for inviting me tonight, and thank all of you for coming and being a part of this moment. I think it's a moment that's going to be heard and seen around the world. So cheers to you.
Alrighty. Well, let's open it up to questions. I'll come out there, and if you guys want to just come in this area, if you've got a question, I will come down with the microphone so you are able to ask.
We're going to have to bring the bar closer. Everyone wants the bar.
All right, so my question is, and I asked you this earlier, Tucker, is like, what's the life expectancy of the media industrial complex that has been propagating all kinds of lies and disinformation all across our country? Do you see it like self-destructing soon? Because as we talked earlier, a lot of people are getting their news from social media platforms, places like Rumble, X. What is the life expectancy of disinformation networks like CNN and NBC and all these organizations that spread lies against the best interests of our country?
I think it's pretty short. I don't think they have much time left. I feel sad when industries collapse. I mean, I was always rooting for the coal miners. You know what I mean? And the people who make fax machines. Like, I hate change. But the collapse of the legacy media will be one of the happiest days of my life. And I say that as someone who spent his life in the legacy media. I'm the son of someone who did the same, so I've been in it literally for 55 years. And I think it's not only dishonest, there are dishonest things that persist through the generations, but the peculiar combination of dishonest, preachy, stupid, and unattractive is very tough to sustain, and that's where they are. Like, there's almost nobody on any of those channels who's not stupid and a liar. There are some, like, I know everybody, so there are some who got trapped there or something, you know what I mean? It's like being stuck in an elevator with people who haven't bathed and they can't get out. But most of them know exactly what they're doing, and they deserve to be punished for it through unemployment. And I think that's coming really soon, simply because nobody wants the product. Who would watch that crap? When Trump got shot the other day, I've asked everybody I've ever talked to in the last 2 weeks, where did you get your news when that happened? In the most dramatic, horrible possible thing. Trump is shot, oh my gosh. Did anybody go to a cable news network or to a broadcast? Of course not. Of course not. Exactly. So that just tells you right there, they're done. And last thing I'll say is, if you're no longer the source of news, the place where people go, Walter Cronkite, I want to see the moon landing, right? They're not that, demonstrably. So then what's left? Well, analysis or entertainment. Well, they're not entertaining. They're preachy and screechy and just absolutely awful and plastic and enhanced and in no sense appealing at all. It's very unattractive people with terrible personalities. And their analysis is stale and stupid.
How do you really feel, though, Tucker?
I just couldn't have more contempt, and it's the contempt bred from familiarity. It's not like I'm guessing at this. I spent my life with these people trapped in that elevator, and I just despise them. I have no respect at all.
I'll answer while we're waiting for the next question. The future of legacy media is the same as the future of legacy money. It's going to zero, okay? Going to zero.
And for the same reason, can I just say? It's like you're handed this amazing thing. You have the trust of the entire country, both if you're the Federal Reserve or the Treasury Department. Everyone trusts you. This is the currency of the world. It's the world's reserve currency. And you squander that through greed and stupidity. Same with the media. Your NBC News, people love you. Their grandparents loved you. And in one generation, you destroy all of that because you can't stop lying and being selfish and dumb. They wreck themselves.
Hey, guys, I read today that Kamala Harris was not, in fact, the border czar. Every day. It's
Fake news.
I'm like, I can find 50 articles, 50 congressmen, 50 reporters all saying it. I got fact-checked for putting that up. Like, she owns the border crisis, as Joe Biden's border czar. I got fact-checked by USA Today. There was then a piece in Axios by an individual reporter, I forget his name, that was like, this had never happened. 18 months ago, this same reporter wrote an entire article about her being Biden's border czar. Like, it wasn't even like it was the same publication. It was the same journalist. It doesn't matter. And so they don't deserve our respect. They deserve whatever contempt we have for them. It is not enough at this point because they're functioning simply as propagandists. We saw that. Honestly, what was interesting was the last 3 weeks before Joe Biden dropped out, it was the only time legacy media, on both sides, frankly, has been even a little bit honest. Now, it was for a purpose. It was to drive him out so they could get their preferred candidate in. But it was the one time they were actually a little bit introspective about what a disaster that we have a vegetable running our country. Like, it's a problem. And now they're back to full propaganda mode. Kamala Harris is no longer the most liberal person in the Senate, even if these same agencies reported that she wasn't. She was rated there by multiple governmental agencies. They're trying to change the system. They're going to do what they did with Joe Biden. He's incredibly moderate. He's incredibly intellectual. He's 100% not brain dead. They're doing it again for an arguably even less likable candidate. It's sort of like cackling Hillary.
And they're going to do it to you, by the way. You should know that. This is not just the political sphere. They're not especially political, and they're not ideological. What they care about is fitting in with the group and serving the people in power. That's it. They want control. That's all they want. And you are a threat to that. So they are going to, I know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to tie you to drug traffickers, arms dealers, and child molesters. It's exactly the same story. It's what they did to the guy who ran Silk Road. He got life in prison. What, because he was dealing drugs? Well, he wasn't dealing drugs. He had an online marketplace they couldn't control. And by the way, they're not against drug dealers. You can buy fentanyl in Union Square in San Francisco. You can buy it in Washington Square Park in New York. They don't stop it. They don't care. They're not against drug dealing at all. What they're against is the White House. Exactly right. There's an 8-ball found in the White House. It's like they don't care.
That was blamed on me.
Yeah, well, it was.
No. The media blamed me. I'm like, I haven't been there in like 4 years. I don't know how it's me, apparently.
And also, you keep track of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to leave stuff like that behind.
But they put that guy in prison for the rest of his life because he was operating out, which is appalling, by the way, because he was operating outside their control. And they tarred him with child molester, drug trafficker, arms dealer. And they're going to do exactly the same to anyone who promotes cryptocurrency because the U.S. government doesn't control it.
Right
I'm just
there.
telling you that.
Can we give a cheer to Donald Trump for doing the right thing and commuting Ross Ulbricht's sentence? How badass is that? And like, just to piggyback on a thread that was mentioned earlier about, the reason that Democrats and the political establishment hate Bitcoin is because they want to squash the little guy. putting Ross Ulbricht in jail for 2 life sentences and 40 years was about sending a message to the little guy that if you step out of line, we will fuck you up. We will put you in jail for the rest of your life. We will sentence you into a small box for the rest of your life. Like a 27-year-old kid. And you know what? When we get Ross Ulbricht out, that's a message too. It's a message right back to the system that there's a new power dynamic at play, and the little person's not going to be put in a box anymore. So cheers to Donald
Yes.
Trump.
Well, it's also, my father's a believer in that because they tried to do it to him. They couldn't control him, so they're going to throw him in prison forever. I mean, they'll change statute of limitations, they'll violate state laws, they'll do whatever machination they need to trample justice to be able to go after those people. Once it's happened to you, you understand just how broken and corrupt it is. And again, if they can do it to a Ross, if they can do it to a Trump, they can do it to anyone. But most importantly, they will do it to anyone because you mean nothing to them.
Yes. I want to open it up to another person for a question.
Don Jr. and family, number one, I'm glad your father's okay from the assassination attempt 2 weeks ago. And I think it's amazing that the media has just gone right past it. I think it's ridiculous. While you guys were in the White House, what were one of the 1, 2, or 3 influences you guys had put upon you, whether it's domestic or global?
Ooh. Well, listen, for me, it was an interesting thing, right? I was a real estate guy, but I saw, that full, actually, we talked about it a lot, Tucker. The Russia thing was sort of what changed my mindset on everything. If you would have asked me, 10 years ago about Snowden, if you would have asked about Julian Assange, I would have said, these guys sold out secrets. And it was only once they went after me personally, when they went after my family, my entire mindset changed. It was like, wait a second. When Russia started, I was like, wait, you know what? I must have done something. I take 10,000 selfies a day. If you were on the floor today, you saw that. And, someone that was an agent must have gotten a picture with me. The CIA said it. So there had to be something. The FBI said it, so there has to be something to it, because I wanted to believe that I lived in an America that I always thought I grew up. It turns out that America no longer exists. It may have at one point in time. It's probably been bastardized and taken over far before we ever got into politics. But it was only then that I realized, it's all a lie. And to me, that awakening changed everything. It's why I sort of got so much more, aggressive in my fight, in the pushback, in supporting even things like this that are so counterculture to the swarm that I see coming at us. And so, to me, that was a big one. Because again, I really legitimately wanted to believe, and it was only then it was like finding out Santa doesn't exist. Hopefully there's not too many kids in the room. It was like, oh my God, like my entire worldview has changed entirely. And now that I look at everything, I look at it with such skepticism. And frankly, I think we all should be looking at it that way, because I'm sure it's not just what happened to me. This is an overreach across the board in every sector, in every aspect. And anything we can do to stop that is important. I think that's why, frankly, the push against my father is so much more visceral now, so much more severe, to the point that, I don't honestly think that the guys at the Secret Service, many of who I know and respect, magically left an entire roof unguarded where a guy with a rifle could get there for 20 minutes within 150 yards. Like, that doesn't happen, right? That's not being a conspiracy theorist. You're a freaking idiot if you think that just happened by coincidence, right? So you see enough of these things, you lose a lot of faith in those institutions. When you lose a lot of faith in those institutions, they lose power, but everyone else has to come to that same conclusion. Once we band together, as you said, 150 million Americans believing in Bitcoin, 150 million or more Americans understanding where our government is going, we become a lot harder to stop and a lot harder to control, and that's when we start regaining our freedom.
There's 50 to 70 million Americans right now that own Bitcoin or crypto. So, I think on an annualized growth rate, we're growing at over 100% per year. So that means that within the next 4 years, there will be 150 million Americans that own this asset.
The Democrats will show up with 4 billion votes, as you said. It's like they would show up with 4 billion votes on November 6th, and with a straight face tell us that it was the most free and fair election. It's only when we actually show some resistance. So the reality is we have to become unafraid. I get it. I've been gone after. They've gone after my family. It's cost us a lot of money. It's cost us a lot. If everyone else takes that same approach and just goes back on the attack, this fight is over. It's that fear of doing that. And again, no one understands better the consequences of being, a conservative, of being vocal. It's even worse if you're vocal and a Trump-supporting conservative. But at this point, we have no choice because we have to leave our children and our, the next generation a country that they recognize.
Let's go to the next question.
This is less of a question, more of a statement to something Tucker said, which is everybody needs to understand and be able to use Bitcoin to buy their Zyn pouches or whatever it is. So, not trying to contradict you, but Bitcoin is not enough. I say this as a cypherpunk who has been working on Bitcoin for 10 years. It's a great tool. We need more tools. Ultimately, all conflict resolution devolves to power. Bitcoin is a non-violent way to resolve disputes in cyberspace. But something that the cypherpunks have realized more than a decade ago, pre-Bitcoin, is that it's not enough to have a peer-to-peer currency. So I would like you to explore more the aspect of Bitcoin as proto-money. It's not money yet. It's not generally accepted medium of exchange. You can't buy your Zyn and he can't buy an Uber ride with Bitcoin yet. But it's bigger than that. It's an expression of freedom, right? It's an expression of rebellion that you are not going to be bound by this centrally controlled rent-seeking cathedral that we all experience. Very few people can verbalize and probably understand what the hell I'm talking about. But you feel it, you see it. It's like the matrix that you're stuck in. Bitcoin is a tool. It's a wonderful tool, probably the greatest tool we've had. But in the end, people with attention spans, like yourself, like Don Jr., his dad, David, you all have to come down and realize that all of the luxury beliefs that we've been burdened with have to be washed away. It's a painful process. It's like chemotherapy. And the question is, for you to get back to the ideals that made this country, how would you avoid violence as a part of the solution? What's your plan for that? Bitcoin is not enough.
Well, I mean, we're seeing violence. I mean, the Biden administration allowed Trump to get shot, either wittingly or not.
True.
They allowed it. That's just a fact. That's violence. Shooting a man in the face is violence. Putting a man in prison is violence. I know a lot of people who've been in prison in the past 4 years under Biden, not just a few, a lot. And hundreds of them. Well, Bannon's in prison right now. Hundreds of nonviolent January 6 protesters went to prison, and many are still there. So those are all acts of violence. They're totally comfortable with violence. They're not one of the things that freedom-loving people miss in the wake of the BLM riots when they were like, defund the police. They're not against the police. They're for a police state. They're against police they can't control. So, no, they're absolutely comfortable with violence. I am not comfortable. I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm just not comfortable with violence. I've seen a lot of violence, covered a number of wars. I mean, I'm familiar with it. That made me less for violence, much less for violence. But they're not against it. Well, that's why they're promoting all these pointless wars. The point of the war, I say pointless, the point of the war is to kill people and to make the people prosecuting the war feel like God, and in a lot of cases richer, as in Ukraine. So, I mean, I think we underestimate the darkness that opposes us. And I also think the time is short. I think you make a really smart point that I'm going to think about tonight about how Bitcoin is not enough, maybe crypto itself is not enough. I mean, these are really deep problems. But if I could just express one thought in one sentence, it would be the time is short. This is accelerating really fast. They just let Trump get shot. Like, if that doesn't wake you up, whatever you think, maybe you hate Trump. You're not allowed to shoot your political opponents. You can't do that. And they just did it. They allowed that. And no one was punished for it. And so if that doesn't awaken you to the reality of what we're looking at, we've got to figure something out really, really fast. That's what I think.
We have a few questions on the left.
Hey, question for Tucker. I'm curious, do you think the left is going to endorse crypto because they believe in it or because they have to try and steal voters in the upcoming election?
I think they'll make a lot of squirrely noises about it. I'm not even sure what the left is. I'll be totally blunt. Some of my favorite people are on the kind of crazy left. Turns out we agree on a lot. We're against the centralization of power, against monopolies, against a lot of these wars, and for things like crypto. So I don't know if it's the left, but it's the neoliberals, it's the statists, it's the people, it's the power worshipers. And they'll say whatever they need to say, but they will never meaningfully endorse an alternative to a monetary system they control, because that's suicide. Because in the end, we saw this in Canada, I do think a lot of crypto evangelists underestimate what happened in Canada 2 years ago in Ottawa with the truckers' protest. And they shut down those crypto exchanges. And a lot of people like me are like, whoa, wait a second. I didn't think they could do that. Well, you need a cold wallet. Okay. So I asked, because I'm actually legit. I'm not just here to entertain. Like, I actually am really interested in this, and I am really rooting for it. What's a cold wallet? I'm like, I can barely operate an iPhone. You got to try harder to make it easier for me. You need to offer me, I don't know who I'm even speaking to, but like anyone who promotes crypto needs to make it easy for people who are 55 and not interested in technology like me, but really care about freedom, to preserve our own wealth in a way that people like Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden cannot freeze it. The second there's a protest leader in this or any other country who can continue to receive funds from supporters in defiance of the powers he's opposing, that person will be the most inspiring figure in the cryptocurrency movement ever, because all the rest of us look and be like, oh, that guy can continue to say what he thinks. He can continue to live free because of this technology. That will be the acid test. And that's the point where I just sell my house and put it in Bitcoin.
Hypothetically, if I were to fly out to your location, would you be open to coming on a podcast, talking about crypto, and potentially introducing your ideas to a completely new audience?
We're very heavily armed where I live in my undisclosed location. So text me first before you come. And I'm not making fun of your haircut or anything, but just like any newcomer, we've got tripwires, like, fishing line with soda cans full of rocks and stuff. Yeah, he stayed at my house.
I'm agile. I'll grab you after, though. Thank you.
Okay.
Alrighty, let's go over here for the next question.
Can I just say, absolutely, progressives are eventually going to embrace Bitcoin. Like, what's happening in Bitcoin is not a decade-long thing. It's not a lifetime thing. It's a multi-century thing. And it is not going to be politically viable to have an anti-Bitcoin position in the same way that it wasn't politically viable to be anti-American 50 years ago or anti-God. And, if you look at the roots of Bitcoin are in the Tea Party and in Occupy Wall Street. And if you go check out Occupy Wall Street, there was a bunch of progressives there. And if you look at RFK bills himself as a progressive candidate. And if you actually ask RFK how did he get into Bitcoin, it was the truckers' protest. So I think you'll find that actually the left and the right agree on a lot of different items if they're being authentic. Okay, there's a bunch of statists in both parties. Trump purged a lot of the statists out of the Republican Party.
What you're saying is totally true.
But there's still, we got to purge the statists out of the progressive camp. But there are well-meaning progressives, and Bitcoin is a solution to the problems that they're concerned about in the world too. So absolutely, they're going to embrace it. But I think it's going to happen probably next election after we crush them in this election and they realize, wow, we really fucked up.
By the way, we got to purge plenty of guys on our side too, because they're
the
just
never
as bad
Trumpers.
as the
They had to go.
statists.
Yeah.
Let's go over here.
So I'm an attorney for a pharmaceutical company in San Francisco.
Sorry what I said.
And I'm in the process of quitting my job because the DEI culture and the management's demanding me to manage somebody differently because of the color of their skin. And I refuse to do it, and so I'm in this process. So I'm just curious, what's the Trump agenda to fight DEI? And then also, self-servingly, if there's any contacts or people I could talk to see if that's where I fit in, that'd be cool. But I'm just curious what you guys think about that.
Well, I mean, obviously, we've been pretty vocal about it. I know I certainly have, as Boeing airplanes start falling out of the air because we decide to put engineers that don't know anything about engineering in it, but they are trans. It's a wonderful concept. It doesn't seem like the kind of plane I want to get on. Listen, the reality is this: you got to do that through the DOJ. You got to do it through many of whom have been corrupted. So a big part of that is, and the big reason the push is now. The difference between now and 4 years ago, when my father was in there, or 8 years ago, he gets in, he doesn't know anyone in Washington, D.C., right? The plum book that the president assigns these jobs for is 4,000 jobs. We knew about 3 people in Washington, D.C. a big part of the fear is now you know who the scumbags are. Now you know who are the people who are going to slow roll you. Now you know who are going to delay you. And I think that's what they fear the most. But the reality is you also need, as I said earlier about being unafraid, you need people like yourselves who've done that. We actually have a mutual friend who was a partner who's in corporate America as a recruiter, and literally it will literally get a directive from a Fortune 500 company. I don't want to get the person fired. That's why, because it'll happen, right? But, we don't want any white people. We don't want any even white women. We need, so if you check any number of boxes, you can get, but you need whistleblowers that will come out and say, this is happening, because it's actually illegal, despite the push from the Democrats. Despite that this is a huge part of the Democrat platform and the agenda, it is literally breaking the law.
It's evil, too.
It's evil, it's sick, and in many cases, airplanes and medicine, it's literally probably killing people. And that has to be stopped. And so you need a combination of the right people in government. You need to not just put someone at the top of an institution, but you got to sweep out the rest of these institutions where that's sort of become, sort of a religion of bureaucracy. But you also need people like yourselves to have the guts to come out. And I understand the consequences of that. So, no different than, hey, I like the door kickers at the FBI. I understand they're not the leadership, but when they keep going and, knocking down the doors of an Amish farmer for selling unpasteurized milk and arresting them while entrapping others in bullshit, ploys to, fake kidnapping plots of the Governor Whitmer, eventually I stopped giving them a pass, because you can't just be on the sidelines allowing it to happen and say, well, it's just my job. Eventually, if everyone steps up, together we can do this. But with just changing government or not having people silent there, it's not going to happen. You need both of those guys coming together. So I'd love for someone like you to come out to tell those stories. I'm sure between us, if you show us the right stuff, we'll create a platform to make it a big deal and help blow it up, because that's kind of what we do.
Like tomorrow afternoon, actually, you need a civil rights division that upholds civil rights, which we don't have. I think it's one of the worst. Destroying the meritocracy, which underpinned everything of value in the United States, is like the worst thing that's happened in our lifetimes. The race hatred that they've engendered and fanned, that's what happened to Occupy Wall Street, whose basic aims, I'll speak for myself, I completely agree. Do the banks have too much power? Are you freaking kidding? It's one of the reasons I like crypto. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it becomes this race thing. Well, of course, it was subverted by the people with power. Go hate yourselves. You go hate go hate each other. It's what the British did in India. So the last thing I'll say is, bless you for taking that stand. I think it's really important. I think the people who love you in your life will love you more for that and respect you more, no matter what they're saying to you now. You're crazy. We paid for your law school and now you're quitting your job. But long term, you can look at yourself and feel like you did the right thing, which is worth more than any law firm salary. And the second thing I would say is, just to echo what Don said, I really hope that you say it out loud. And by the way, I think it's best for you. I've interviewed like 1,000 people who take a stand against the man, and I've cheered every one of them in public and in my heart. I really mean it. And they've all done better, actually. They've done better. People reward bravery and honesty. And if they think that you're brave and honest, you'll take a bunch of shit from here to your reward. Trust me, you will suffer, but you're going to suffer anyway. You're suffering now. So you go public, man. I mean it. They deserve it.
Let's go to the next question over here. And we have a couple more minutes for this.
Thank you, ma'am. Hey, y'all. My name's Chris. I'm a law student here in Nashville. I'm just getting ready to enter my third year. And I think I've decided that I'd really like to spend my career fighting for freedom, because I love this country. I really do. I'm very grateful to be here. And what I'm wondering, if you're in my shoes, if you're a young attorney who loves your country and loves liberty and wants to fight for it, what would you encourage myself and people like me to do? Where would you look? Where would you go? What would you do so that you can have an impact on the type of values we've been talking about tonight? Self-ownership, autonomy, decentralized power, those sorts of things. Where would you go? What would you do?
Well, let me just say, I would avoid big law. I really would. 3 of my 4 roommates went into it. They're all gone now. But I do, and this was 30 years ago, I do think it's soul-crushing. It doesn't mean everyone in big law has a crushed soul. There are good people in it, I think. I haven't met any, but I'm taking that on faith. But there are certainly a lot of people in this country who need legal help. I mean, we had dinner, Don and I had dinner tonight with Chris Pavlovsky, who runs Rumble. and he said, "Do you know any lawyers who'd represent us in an antitrust case?" I mean, we're governed by monopolies right now. I don't know if you guys noticed that. Like, no one's antitrust anymore. It's like, oh, you've got too many choices. Let's reduce that by putting all power into a smaller number of hands. Someone needs to represent about 1 million different people in antitrust cases, and not just against the obvious ones like Google. I mean, everything's being gobbled up by private equity. Your dentist office, your veterinarian, like, you're seeing a massive, particularly it's accelerated after COVID, a massive shift of power from the many to the few. And it's illegal. It's illegal under antitrust law in a lot of cases, and there are no lawyers who are taking those cases. I think the Second Amendment, which is a foundational right without which we are slaves, and if you don't believe me, go to Canada or Australia, actually, needs people to defend it. No big law firm famously would even defend the NRA, which is pretty weak in my opinion. NRA is pathetic, actually. It's a joke, and no one would even defend them.
But they would defend the pilots or the people involved in the 9/11 flights, right? They rushed to defend those, but they wouldn't defend my father.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
wouldn't defend the former president of the United States. So, that unequal justice under the law is very apparent. So picking a side, going all in for that, I think is so important because it's totally underrepresented.
Let's go to the next question over here.
Boy, there's a lot of lawyers here tonight. Sorry about that. First I want to say I worked my way through college and law school at Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City. So thank you thank you very much. The best government program is a job.
My first job was as a dock attendant at Trump Castle, also in Atlantic City, like 13 years old, living away from home.
And I remember
we started at the bottom rung.
I remember when your father would come to the property and he would treat the valets and the maintenance men and the dealers all the same as he treated high rollers. So just thank you for that. I was drawn to crypto because I view it as a way to battle tyranny. I think that your father, I think you, Tucker, have a very visceral anger and battle that you want to wage against tyranny, against the great deception in this country. And that's why I'm drawn to it. I think it's an equalizer that has the potential to lift people up, but also to protect us. So one part of my question is, how do we see crypto having a seat at the table in the next Trump administration? I.e., are you going to appoint a crypto czar, one who will not deny that they are a crypto czar later on? But also, I would say the next part would be, is it possible? Is it even possible now, or how can we clean up this two-tier justice system, which just screams of tyranny and injustice every day? I don't even know if it's possible, so it's really those two kind of things. Thank you very much.
Well, you got to start somewhere, and so I think, we're starting with that right now. As it relates to crypto, I mean, I think, J.D. Vance is a vice presidential pick with his background in tech, with his understanding of that, the people on that side and crypto who've come out in clear support of him. You actually probably have someone who has more of a fundamental understanding than literally anyone who holds office in the United States as a vice presidential candidate. I mean, I think that's someone that could either be that person himself or certainly oversee something like that and actually create, whether it's sort of the framework that that a Coinbase type of company would want, that they, a legal framework to function under, just to have sort of operating principles to be able to work under. I think you have the greatest opportunity to have someone who actually understands the players, actually has the respect of those players, so maybe you get people from the outside world to come in, not some bureaucrat who's never known anything, but it's like, well, okay, I guess if you're going to put me in there, I'll learn the game and do it all wrong, and government will have all the power. So I think you have an incredible opportunity, frankly, in J.D. Vance to be able to be, either that guy or one of the people to spearhead that operation and create the structures that you need, for crypto, for Bitcoin, whatever it may be, out there in government. Someone who actually gets it, and most importantly, again, who knows and has the respect of the people in the community that are the creators, that are the innovators, that could set up a framework that is correct from the beginning, not just a bureaucratized set of laws and bullshit where all the grifters get in on every little piece of the action and skim everything off the top, because they control some lobbyists.
We have a question over here. We have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Tucker, this is a question for you. It's a fun question. Have you seen the Tucker Carlson meme? The meme that looks like you and conducts interviews? Have you seen the meme?
No, that is just for my personal tranquility. I don't ever look at anything like that.
I think you should, because he's really, really good. He's really like you, and he's really good. You should see
sort
it.
of loud and faintly annoying.
And very funny, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tucker Carlson, you must see it. You got to see it. You got to see it.
You're South African.
I am.
My favorite accent.
Alrighty, we have a question over here.
Oh, so I just want to ask one more question here, and that's how does God impact all of your decision making? Because I truly believe it was divine intervention that your dad's still here, and I've been praying for him for a long time, and I know the whole country has. I'm gonna keep praying for him. So I just want to know how God, because I feel like this is a spiritual battle, and I just want to know how God is leading all of you in your different areas.
Well, I guess I'll answer briefly. It's, someone, who got that call. I was with my daughter, Kai, was here. We were out fishing because I got the rare call from a 17-year-old daughter that said, "Can we go out fishing?" I'm like, "Really? That happens once every other year, maybe once a year." So, of course, we're going to go do that. If Saturday afternoon you get that call, and I didn't know for an hour and a half, really, what had happened. I got a call from Kim. She said, "Your father's been shot." I go, "Well, and? I mean, I need more than that." So we got home, and then, you start seeing the video and the news, and finally I get a hold of him. You see it all come together, and, came from a long-range competitive shooting background. I really know this stuff pretty well. I know that, for that to have happened, for him to have made it, there's literally to look over, ironically, at an immigration chart, which I've never even seen him do in 100 rallies to point to a chart. It's not really how he speaks. If you were ever in doubt that there's a higher power or some sort of divine intervention, I mean, I think that moment to me certainly would have erased all of it. So it was, it does feel like there has to be something far more. So obviously it's a big part. I don't talk about my spirituality all that often, but that was the one moment where I was like, yeah, there's literally no other explanation.
Well, just the fact that your question got applause at a Bitcoin conference kind of blows my mind. And it just shows as an extremely secular native of California who spent many, many decades never thinking about God because that's stupid. What does that have to do with whatever I want? You know what I mean? I think a lot of people have arrived at the conclusion that, not everything, a couple things, not everything is explicable through conventional political terms. Things happen and you're like, well, that's bigger than people, actually. We happen to be living in a pivot point in history, so things are just bigger. They're in starker relief, and you can kind of see things more clearly than you would. And I'm running into people all the time, and maybe they don't have fully formed theological views. Most of them actually don't. But people are mentioning God, and I'm from the most secular world you can even imagine, probably like many of you. People are mentioning God in conversation, a lot. Amazing. And the second thing I think that people are starting to realize, and beautiful and great, to be commended in my view. The second thing I think people are starting to realize is really is the purpose of life really buy a bunch of shit on Amazon and go to St. Bart's for a week? Maybe there's something more. Maybe there is kind of a lack of meaning in our public life anyway, and I think we all feel it. If I got everything I wanted, would it be enough? Well, I actually have done that. I actually have a couple times gotten everything I wanted. I have very low goals, so it wasn't that hard, but yeah, it's not enough, actually. And there's something in us that wants transcendence, and we shouldn't be ashamed to say that. So yeah, I mean, I'm the last person who would ever associate my lowly name with something as grand and holy as Christianity, so I'm not going to do that now. But I think there's actually I really think there's a religious revival going on in the country right now. I see it.
Thank you. Something so true you said the other day, Tucker. You said God is among us. God really is among us. We have time for one more question. Let's hand it over.
I'll answer the question briefly, and it's a tough question for me to answer because I don't really feel like a super spiritual person. But I've been in Bitcoin now, I guess 12 years, 13 years, and I've extracted some observations from that. And one thing that I've extracted is that those that believe that something can happen and pursue it, regardless of the cynicism, regardless of how dark things are, can fulfill themselves, their communities, those around them, and can go beyond any cynicism, can go beyond any pessimist could possibly imagine. And so believing in something and pursuing that thing, irrespective of what others think about it, is, in my opinion, how you find meaning and fulfillment in life, and how you're rewarded prosperity in life. So, believe. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I go by D&B Wizard. I love blockchain, crypto for all the reasons that everyone has mentioned. I believe that mass adoption will come. However, at the minute, the blockchain isn't encrypted by default. So, for example, if I send President Donald Trump 1 Bitcoin, if you can track the wallets, you can see everything. There is no real privacy. So I think that will eventually come. Eventually, encryption will come to the blockchain, and that will do for the blockchain what e-commerce, when that came in on Web 2, that was empowered by encryption. So I just want to put it on your radar when mass adoption does come. And Don Jr., when you're in the crypto task force discussing crypto and encryption comes up, it's not a bad thing. Encryption isn't secrecy or crime, it's privacy. So I would just like to put that on your radar and just say privacy and encryption isn't a crime. It's very important, and encryption is a good thing. I saw that Tucker, for example, doesn't use a laptop because he's worried about getting hacked or getting something planted on his laptop. This isn't the right environment for us to be operating in. The internet is broken and blockchain is broken, so encryption needs support, and it's not a crime. And I just wanted to put that on your radar, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Can I just respond to that really quickly? Privacy is the point. With no privacy, there's no freedom. It's a prerequisite for freedom. We torture people by putting them in boxes and staring at them all day and keeping the lights on. That's the worst punishment we mete out in the United States, is solitary confinement monitored. No privacy, no freedom. You know where there is privacy and secrecy in great abundance? The federal government, which is classified over 1 billion documents describing what they're doing with our money in our name. This is our government. And yet they have every right to keep key decisions from us. They just allowed the presidential candidate to get shot, and we're not allowed to know how that happened or why. So to take a lecture from them about how I'm a criminal because I want privacy in my financial transactions or my phone calls or my text messages, really fuck you, actually.
And you don't get it?
And I don't get it, but I demand it. I'm sorry to use profanity, but that makes me so mad. That's prima facie evidence of a crime. You haven't even declassified the Kennedy assassination files 61 years later, and you're lecturing me about wanting to have an encrypted text conversation. How dare you? You worked for me. You should be in prison.
I agree. Thank you. Free Ross. Free Ross.
Yeah. And when Snowden can come back to this country to the ticker tape parade he deserves, then we'll know we live in a free country.
100%.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Hi there. Hey, guys. Hey, David. How you doing, Tucker? This is really a question for Don. It's amazing, that your father was president coming out of the business sector, and amazing for the future budget. I think the one exposure that I bet David could explain is having to use banks with your real estate portfolio, right? So Axos and Deutsche Ladder, they're not really Axos and Deutsche Ladder. They're iShares, which is BlackRock, which is State Street, which is Vanguard, which is owned by private
I'm
companies.
aware.
Okay, so really hard to be president. Pfizer's controlled by BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, as is your banks. There's an idea that a lot of us were talking about because we want you guys to have pure authenticity. I bet David could describe how if you put your real estate up to be tokenized and decentralized instead of controlled by BlackRock, you would be free of any sort of suspicion in terms of being compromised. And David, I don't know what you think about that, but it would be amazing if the world could get behind the Trumps and tokenize the real estate.
Just so we're, a lot's happened to us in the last few years. I mean, even in the last few months, as we've started embracing this, a lot of that people have started actually coming up to us, bringing up that concept. It's actually something we're talking about as a company. So there's a lot more to come on that, but we understand that now. I could still say a loan document for a 30-year loan. There's only so much that even BlackRock or Vanguard can really do with that once you're locked in. As things turn over, right, there's change and there's pressure. I think we're in the position kind of under leveraged that it never really created an issue for us. But understanding that you could get rid of those institutions entirely, but also that a big part of the interest rate on it, a big part of the transaction fees, the points in and out, is all for bullshit. It's someone pushing some paper. It doesn't really earn anything, but it's a system that's been just created all these inefficiencies. So, we love the idea of tokenization of some of these assets. Sort of the concept of a broader, DeFi type platform, getting it out of these institutions, leaving it with the people. So, I imagine in the coming weeks and months, you'll probably hear a lot more from us about some stuff we're actually looking at very closely. So, more to come on that one, but it's already in the works.
Alrighty, everyone. That concludes our fireside chat. We're going to have David Bailey say a couple words, so I'm going to hand it off to him.
Yeah, so I just wanted to hijack the conversation for just 1 minute here. And, Don Jr., while I have you stranded on a stage, I just wanted to say a couple words. Like, who was a Trump fan in the first election, the first campaign? Who was on the Donald? Who remembers the Donald, the subreddit? Okay.
Didn't they shut that?
They shut it down.
Yeah.
Of course they shut it down. But, the Bitcoin community has actually backed your father for a long time. All the way back to the days of the Donald. Bitcoin is anti-establishment money, and we always saw your father as the anti-establishment candidate. And the more they came after him, the more we liked him. And we backed him in the first election, and we always knew that at some point down the road, he would get savvy with Bitcoin and with crypto. We didn't know when it would be. It's been a journey. It's a journey for everyone. But we always knew that he would come around to it. And to see him be the political leader to take this, to champion our cause, is an amazing thing to see. And the people in this room and the people at the conference, the energy you felt today, it's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democrat thing. It is the Orange Party, okay?
Orange man good.
Orange man good. And it is truly a populist movement. And your father has a great next presidency ahead of him, but he's also an old man. He's done a lot for the country, okay? And there is a lot of leadership to come from the Trump family for decades to come. And so, I hope that you champion the Orange Party and you embrace this partnership, because we're your backers, we're your supporters, and we need leaders that will champion the anti-establishment cause. And so thank you to your father, and we look forward to great things to come.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. And we will.